Cher Ami, The Pigeon That Saved a Lost Battalion, October 1918. The First World War was entering its final and most brutal chapter. Across the scarred landscape of France, millions of soldiers were locked in a struggle that had already consumed entire generations. Artillery thundered day and night, trenches stretched across Europe like open wounds. And amid the chaos, one of the greatest communication crises in military history was unfolding. Today, when commanders can communicate instantly through satellites and encrypted networks, it is difficult to imagine an army unable to contact its own troops. But in World War I, communication was often the difference between survival and annihilation. Telephone lines were constantly severed by shellfire. Radio technology was still primitive and unreliable. Messengers sent on foot frequently disappeared into machine gun fire. In this environment, one of the most advanced armies in the world was forced to rely on a surprisingly ancient solution: pigeons. And among hundreds of thousands of wartime messenger pigeons, one bird would become a legend. Its name was Cher Ami, French for dear friend. This is the story of how a single wounded pigeon became one of the most unlikely heroes of World War I. But to understand why Cher Ami mattered, we first need to understand the battlefield crisis that made history. By the autumn of 1918, Allied forces had launched the massive Meuse-Argonne offensive. It was the largest military operation in American history up to that point. More than 1 million American soldiers were committed to the campaign. The objective was simple but deadly: break the German defenses and force the war toward its conclusion. Among the units advancing through the dense Argonne Forest was the U.S. Army's 77th Division. Many of its soldiers came from the immigrant neighborhoods of New York City. Irish, Italian, Jewish, Polish, working-class men who now found themselves fighting one of the most dangerous battles of the war. Their commander was Major Charles Whittlesey. On October 2nd, 1918, Whittlesey's force pushed aggressively forward through German defenses. Too aggressively. While neighboring units stalled, the 77th Division continued advancing. Soon, approximately 550 American soldiers found themselves isolated deep behind enemy lines. German forces closed around them. The Americans were trapped. What followed would later become famous as the ordeal of the Lost Battalion. The name itself sounds dramatic. The reality was worse. The trapped soldiers occupied a small ravine. German machine guns dominated the surrounding terrain. Food supplies were nearly exhausted. Water was scarce. Medical assistance was virtually impossible. Every attempt to send runners through enemy lines ended in disaster. Some were killed. Others disappeared. Communication with American headquarters had collapsed, and then the situation became catastrophic. American artillery began shelling its own men. Friendly fire. The artillery units supporting the offensive did not know the Lost Battalion's exact location. Believing German troops occupied the area, they unleashed devastating barrages directly onto the trapped Americans. Shells exploded among exhausted soldiers already fighting for survival. Men who had escaped German bullets were now dying from American artillery. Whittlesey understood the horrifying truth. If communication could not be restored immediately, his battalion might be destroyed by its own side. The major still had one option left: pigeons. Throughout World War I, homing pigeons had become an essential military asset. Despite the arrival of modern technologies, pigeons remained astonishingly reliable. Military studies suggested delivery success rates as high as 95%. A pigeon could fly through smoke, through artillery fire, through bad weather. And unlike telephone wires, it could not be cut by enemy bombardment. Across the war, hundreds of thousands of pigeons carried messages that influenced military operations and saved lives. Yet even among these remarkable birds, Cher Ami stood apart. Cher Ami had already served with distinction before joining American forces. The bird had reportedly carried messages during the Battle of Verdun, one of the bloodiest battles in human history. By October 1918, however, its most important mission was still ahead. Inside the Argonne Forest, conditions were desperate. Previous pigeons sent from the Lost Battalion had failed. Some had been shot down. Others never returned. Time was running out. Casualties were mounting. The American artillery barrage continued. Whittlesey prepared one final message. The note was written on lightweight paper and placed inside a small aluminum capsule attached to the pigeon's leg. The words were simple, direct, urgent. We are along the road parallel to 276.4. Our own artillery is dropping a barrage directly on us. For heaven's sake, stop it. The message carried more than coordinates. It carried the fate of hundreds of men. Soldiers gathered as Cher Ami was released. The bird climbed into the air. Almost immediately, German soldiers recognized what was happening. Messenger pigeons had become valuable military targets. The Germans knew that stopping a single bird could prevent critical information from reaching Allied headquarters. Gunfire erupted. A bullet struck Cher Ami. The pigeon fell from the sky. For a brief moment, it appeared the mission had failed. But then something extraordinary happened. The wounded bird rose again. Despite devastating injuries, Cher Ami continued flying. 25 miles separated the trapped battalion from headquarters. The pigeon crossed the battlefield while bleeding heavily. When Cher Ami finally arrived, the bird was barely alive. One eye had been blinded. A deep wound cut across its chest. Its right leg had been nearly severed. The aluminum message capsule remained attached to what was left of the limb. But the message had survived. And that changed everything. American commanders finally understood the Lost Battalion's position. The artillery fire was corrected. Efforts to rescue the trapped soldiers intensified. Days later, relief forces reached the survivors. Of the more than 550 men originally trapped, only 194 emerged alive and able to continue fighting. The exact extent of Cher Ami's contribution has been debated by historians. Battlefield confusion often creates legends. Some scholars caution that no single event alone saved the Lost Battalion. Yet, there is little dispute that the message delivered by Cher Ami provided critical information at a crucial moment. Without that message, casualties almost certainly would have been even greater. The story quickly captured public imagination. In an era desperate for heroes, Cher Ami became a symbol of courage, endurance, and sacrifice. The French government awarded the pigeon the Croix de Guerre with Palm, one of France's highest military honors. It was an extraordinary recognition for a bird. General John J. Pershing, commander of the American Expeditionary Force, reportedly declared that there was almost nothing the United States could do that would be too much for Cher Ami. The wounded pigeon received medical treatment. Veterinarians amputated the damaged leg. Members of the Lost Battalion later crafted a small wooden prosthetic leg for their feathered rescuer. After the war, Cher Ami was brought to the United States as a celebrated hero. Newspapers covered the bird's story. Crowds admired the unlikely veteran. For a brief moment, one of the most famous war heroes in America was not a general, politician, or decorated soldier. It was a pigeon. Yet the injuries suffered during the mission proved too severe. In June 1919, less than a year after the famous flight, Cher Ami died from complications related to wartime wounds. The bird was preserved and placed in the Smithsonian Institution, where it remains today. More than a century later, visitors still stand before the display. Many arrive expecting a simple story about an animal. They leave reflecting on something much larger. The story of Cher Ami is not really about a pigeon. It is about the fragile nature of communication in war. It is about how technological progress can sometimes fail when it is needed most, It is about the hidden heroes history almost forgets. World War I is often remembered through generals, politicians, tanks, and massive offensives. Yet sometimes history turns on smaller events. A single message, a single decision, a single flight. In an age before satellites and digital networks, the survival of nearly 200 soldiers depended upon a wounded bird carrying a note through enemy fire. That reality serves as a powerful reminder. History is not shaped only by the powerful. Sometimes it is shaped by the smallest and most unexpected actors imaginable. And among the countless stories of World War I, few are more remarkable than the tale of Cher Ami, the pigeon that refused to fall, the messenger that defied death, the unlikely hero who carried hope across a battlefield and became a legend.